Bwala, spokesperson, Atiku Okowa Presidential Campaign Organization, joins us this morning to shed further light and not heat on some of what you just heard. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, security, health, economy, among some of the issues the PDP spoke about yesterday in terms of what they intend to do. But data security, we know is going to be huge in terms of how he approaches all of that. But the impression that their security plan will achieve results in 4 years, many may just wonder, well, okay, if all this while, after several years, even up till now, we'll still have security challenges, how do we say for sure that their plan will achieve the said results in 4 years?
I guess the there you're referring to is Atiku Okowa, right? Okay, nowhere in our document, in our policy document, have we mentioned a timeline like 4 years, for dealing with insecurity. It's a global phenomenon, right? It's an ongoing thing. But what we have promised is that Atiku Okowa ticket will bring leadership. And what we think is not demonstrated in the APC-led government is genuine leadership. Leadership that will hold to account people tasked with the responsibility or with the duties of enforcing the law or securing territories. We have seen over the years in this government or in the APC government where service chiefs or individuals who are tasked with the responsibility of securing lives, we are somehow lackluster in the carrying out of their duties and have not been called to book. We have also seen a number of occasions where the news media reported over and over and over the kind of friction existing between interagencies, right? So there's no cooperation. I remember there was a time they talked about when intelligence suggests that the enemies are coming in a certain direction, the foot soldiers will give hints to the Air Force and expect that there will be a raid, and then they will go and mop up the people, and that there will be a delayed, and as a result of which the armies will be affected. We've had that. We've also had a situation where several intelligence reports came out from key security platforms of the government, but policymakers have not been able to act upon it. So, for example, when we had this Kuje, I won't say jailbreak, but Kuje attack, everybody was attacking different, security enforcement agencies of the government, until we got the information that about 6 months earlier, the Department of State Services had in fact hinted that there was a planned attack like that. So if you look at the accumulation of these activities, which is now resulting in chaotic disorder, we hold the view that there are two things involved. One, lack of leadership that will hold people to account. But much importantly, and much more than that, we believe that if you don't know strategy, you become a victim of tragedy. So our belief is that so many things are not put in place.
When you say that, nowhere in the manifesto do you speak about 4 years. Right. They're going to be elected for a 4-year term. That's all that is guaranteed in the first instance. So is it that we shouldn't expect that they will solve the security challenge we have in 4 years?
It is that we should expect that they would deal substantially with insecurity in less than 4 years. But I'll give you an example of pegging certain things when you have not manned the office. I remember when President Muhammadu Bwala, who of course everyone knows has a good intention in ending insecurity, came on board and taxed the security chiefs and gave them 3 months. And he said, go to Borno and the Northeast and in 3 months deal with that situation. And a few months after that, all the security chiefs that were sent to Borno found their way back to Abuja. And there is never a word as to whether the work was concluded or not. You see, timelines are important because they help in people making up their mind and decision about you. Ending insecurity is the point I'm talking about, that we have not time ending insecurity. And when you say ending insecurity, it means bringing insecurity to a point where the nation will be completely free. Now,
no, in terms of the insurgency.
Right. So I believe,
what kind of results should we expect?
In insurgency, I believe that within the period of 4 years, we should be able to stop it. And I will tell you why. And we must first acknowledge the fact that President Muhammadu Bwala tried a little bit, right? And so what we believe is that when we deploy what we have already hinted in our policy document, we're dealing with security. For example, with respect to the armies, we believe that we need to expand their capacity. So 300 or less than 300,000 soldiers are not enough to protect the territorial integrity of the country.
Is it going to employ more?
Yeah. Certainly. And then with the police system, in our document, we said we're looking at a broad-based approach that will increase police personnel. And by that, we're not talking about just the police themselves, but all law enforcement to a max of 1 million. If you have that, you are going to expand that. And because we also have a plan for restructuring, we believe that that devolution of power to states will create the opportunity for states to generate their own law enforcement to deal with insecurity.
Multi-level policing.
Exactly. And when you do that, then of course you believe that to a large extent you'll be able to deal with that problem.
So privatization is also one of the many things that the candidate of your party intends to do. I mean, he keeps talking about the economy and working very strongly with the private sector. There's even this talk around selling the NNPC. He said that in 2019, and he seems to be saying it again. However, you know, there are questions as to how transparent that process is going to be, assuming it were to go through. Some people think that at least the state should be able to keep something, you know, to itself, that it can run by itself. So there are questions around, you know, how is so sure that when privatization happens, it will not be to the friends and cronies of the PDP?
First of all, there must be a transparent process to privatization. And there is a law for that in Nigeria, you know. And then second of all is that if you look at the quote-unquote moribund assets of the federal government, which, like he said yesterday, have hitherto been non-functional, and that every year we have budgets to service what has not been functioning. In other words, we're making losses. I need to correct the impression that privatization means the government is giving up everything. If an asset of government is privatized, there will be a stake of government in the property, I mean in the asset. Secondly, the role that the government will play is that of a regulatory body. You know, the marked difference between us and probably APC is that they believe in full governed economy. The problem about full governed economy is that sometimes you are flexing muscles, even when things are not working. And we also know that between total socialism and capitalism, so quote unquote, one that has significantly improved economy and improved the prosperity of the people is one that encourages to a large extent private participation in the economy. This TV station is a private entity. Now, it has been effective over the years because the environment has been so favorable to this entity. And it has created competition because then now you have too many media outfits, and then you have a system where you assess people. And ever since we had private TVs coming into the media platform of the government, you see that things have changed. It is the same thing. You talk about whether it is a small-scale business, whether you talk about investment in terms of foreign investors, or even domestic investors in a large scale. So whatever it is, when the private sector players are involved in the economy, there is prosperity. I can guarantee you that it is not within the power of Atiku, Abubakar, or Governor Okowa, or anybody in government to upstage the law. There is a law that governs privatization and privatization. Look at Aramco. At the beginning, people thought that the entire lifeline and lifeblood of Saudi Arabia is the oil, and that they were never going to, privatize their oil company to Aramco. Aramco has been privatized, and during this period of Russia-Ukraine war, they were able to post a profit of $90 billion. They had some they put in their stake in the U.S., and some was reinvested back into the economy. We have 4 refineries that are non-functional. And so for the optics, people have used that in the past against him to suggest that anytime you talk about privatization, what it means is that you're going to give back to your friends. If your friends, let me give you a worst case scenario. There is a process that will lead up to privatization and people bid for it. Assuming somebody who happens to know you succeed in the process and owns that, does it mean he's going to wield it the way he wants it? There are laws. There are investors. It means there are shareholders. And you know the law of corporate governance is that the shareholders are entitled to know everything about that organization. It is practically impossible for somebody to say when the assets of government are privatized, then they will now end up in private pocket or become non-effectual. I know in the past there were privatization programs that didn't succeed because after the people have acquired those assets, they did not give it the needed commitment that is required to grow the business.
Which is a danger that, at least you have identified. How are we going to prevent the danger this time around from assets as critical like the NNPC?
So he talked about the role of the public sector, which is to frame laws, policies, and regulation. So if we have a very strong regulation and strong policy, transparent policy that will guide the bidding process, that will everything that is involved around privatization, then you can be sure that people will be able. It's like you are. How do I put it? You know, where something is transparent in the eyes of everyone, where there is a change in color or where there's a malpractice or infraction, somebody will be able to see it. Besides, that's why you exist as members of the press.
Well, you know, we can see all of that. I mean, Nitel is an example, a government entity that was privatized till today. It's not functioning. All the other telcos seem to be doing pretty great, you know, besides Nitel, you know, which was privatized. There are a number of other examples, but I think what people really fear is how do you intend to do this in such a way that jobs are protected? Because part of what we've seen, the hiccups we've seen with privatizing government assets, is also protecting the jobs of the workers who are currently in those entities. Oftentimes, the unions are up in arms with government. Do you envisage this? And, you know, what sort of protection are you going to be offering the workers? Because at the end of the day, it's supposed to be about the welfare of the people.
So in a private sector-led economy, competition and competence is the key factor. And I'm sure that even your organization will not tolerate incompetence. And if you are competent in the public sector that is sold out or privatized, you can be sure to retain your job. It's just like what you say in the banking industry. People who are not effective have found their ways out of the bank. Those who can compete and can show effectiveness and productivity are able to stay. We all have to agree that the system of government we have run since from 1960 till date has not been effective and effectual in checking people who are in civil service. I give you an example of people at state level. People just go to work and come back and get paid. They don't do work, they don't do nothing. And if our idea of a growth and economic growth is to see that just because we want people who are lazy, who are ineffective to stay on the job, you have to pay them because you have to ensure that people keep their job, then I don't think we're prepared for economic development. However, that is not the only sector, or that is not the only, that's not the only sector where people can find opportunities. If I'm working in Nitel, let me give an example of if I'm working in NNPC, for example, and it is privatized, as a result of which I lose my job. If I'm effective, there are other areas I can find job. And with the intention of government to, to invest in small and medium enterprise, it means a lot of people, Nigerians, are going to find those opportunities. What do you talk about people who have graduated, never had a job, and are able to tax their brain and come up with something meaningful? Productivity is key.
I understand, and I cannot dispute the fact that productivity is key. However, there'll be talk around, the example which you cited, which is the bank. Some people will say that, what we have there in a number of, institutions right now is something that contravenes our labor laws, where a lot of members of staff have been casualized, workers that should earn, full pay with benefits are left holding the short end of the stick, excuse me, so to speak. So whilst we privatize and look forward to the benefits that privatization could bring in terms of productivity, there must also be safeguards to ensure that, workers are not exploited even in their own country.
Certainly the process that will lead up to the privatization might involve the retention of workers who are effective and efficient. Workers who are capable, workers who came in to that service with competency. For example, if somebody got the job probably with ND, when you should have actually gotten the job with a degree, and it is privatized, they have to look at that, look at your document and to see whether you came in competently. And if you did not come in competently, the government cannot say because you are in there, we have to go out of our way to keep you there. However, like I said, in a private sector-led economy, jobs are created. So you may be out of a job A, but you can find yourself in job B. You may be out of a job B, you can find yourself in job C. There's practically no sector of the economy today where there is security. Security is in your commitment to succeed in what you do, and this is what a private-led sector economy will provide. If you have increased opportunities, it means you can always find your level.
I assume you must have seen the comment from the APC. They hit back at you already saying, what is he talking about, that the security measure is exaggerated, and that that your party, Atiku, forgot to tell Nigerians that when he also spoke about the fact that there are several out-of-school, Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children, which could challenge insecurity. They say, look, that it stemmed from the leadership of your party, that's the PDP. So how could they come and begin to blame the current government not having done enough in security and that they could do better even with out of school children?
So that's the problem they have, actually. I talked about conflict of self-interest, right? One thing about life is that political position, they are not in perpetuity. When you are elected to office, you serve for 4 years and then renewable for another 4 years. During this period, you are expected to do everything you said you are going to do. Now, what they talked about security and economy and fighting corruption was not a standard set by us, standard set by the media. It's a standard set by themselves. They say, this is what we want to do. When you were coming up with that standard, you ought to have measured, studied, assess the situation on ground and believe, and that's why when the Okowa talked about timeline, I had to be very specific. It's very easy for the optics to come and lie, but we have to be realistic because we've been through a lot as a nation. We have seen 8 years of lies, renewed lies, multiplied lies, which has taken us far, brought us back to the same level. In fact, some people make the case that it has taken us even back. Because, okay, to look, for example, in 2015, we did not have this multidimensional poverty index. I mean, 133 million people thrown out, thrown into multidimensional poverty. Now, you have 8 years, what did you do? They talked about we came in, we saw little income, and they think that by that optics and narrative, they will change or manipulate the people. Do you know during this period, they expanded the tax net, which generated a lot of income for them? Do you know now everything is taxable? There is deposit tax, withdrawal tax. They got to a point where they say, even the money you kept to your account, if they see that you have not been using it for a certain period, they are going to take the money and use it. Do you even know? You see, there is virtually no aspect of government over the last 7 years that they have not exploited those opportunities to meet those demands. But one thing that will knock them all in what they are talking about, they've introduced social investment program. Not a single of those programs has been subjected to scrutiny by the government.
Your principal says that, yes, they will create an institution to absorb all of those. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is accountability.
Isn't that what the government is trying to do already by asking the National Assembly to come up with that law to accommodate it?
Okay, look at it. That's hypocrisy, right? Fallacy of hypocrisy, and I will tell you why. You ask the National Assembly to legislate when those you appointed cannot even account for what they do. Accountability comes and then you legislate, because it is after forensic analysis you'll be able to know what the problems are and then talk about how to come up with laws.
All right, our colleagues in Lagos have got some questions for you.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Mr. Bwala, I'd like you to speak as a Nigerian. I know you are here to represent, your candidate and all. But there is an issue that's been thorny for very many years, even from as far back as maybe even 1999. And it's that of a central control of sorts for security in the country. There are those who would always ascribe various kinds of reasons to why insecurity perpetuates itself. All the security agencies seem to be working in silos. Customs working differently from immigration, FRSC working differently from NDLEA, the police working differently from the army, Navy working away from, Air Force and all. And it's something that the president has said over and over again. You're aware of all of the challenges we're having in that regard. So I'm wondering exactly how will your candidate, saying he is a unifier, unify all of these forces in a way that they work coherently and collaboratively to mitigate insecurity to the barest minimum. Exactly how?
Right, so the how is to provide decisive leadership. He said that yesterday. And let me tell you what decisive leadership in this context means. If you appoint people into various roles, and as a result of which you expect that they will bring all of these roles together in synergy for the purposes of achieving a common goal, and for whatever reason you don't find synergy, you don't find cooperation, you find that they work at cross purposes, what does a leader do in the circumstance? The leader will read the Riots Act, one. The leader will take decision. Because you see, every job given, the job is taxed with responsibility and you are expected to account for it. And for every job, there is a consequence. If you succeed, there is a reward. If you don't, there is a punishment. We have seen just a minor sack in the last 7 years. But for all of the occasions where complaints have come up from agencies which are expected that their colleagues will cooperate to them in the discharge of their functions, we have not seen a decision by the man who appointed the DC, because the box stops only on one desk. They will continue to run the way they are running until the man who is in charge provides the direction. So everything rises and falls on leadership.
Okay. Well, Mr. Bwala, is that saying that your principal will sack anyone who does not perform as expected? I ask that in the background of the fact that you know that it's perhaps easier to remove a minister than a civil servant, especially those who are in office and can only be removed from office or from their jobs based on certain, rule of law, so to speak.
So there is a chain of command. The president will not go beyond the minister to talk to the PAMSEC or to talk to a director in a ministry. The minister is there representing the president. If you look at Section 5, you will see that the executive powers of the federation lies with the president, and that he discharged that duty either by himself or through the vice president or through the ministers and other agents of the federation. So when you see a minister in a ministry, it is the president in that ministry. And so the president will hold to account the minister, not the public servant like the PAMSEC or the director who came by way of recruitment, and except if he violates the law as codified in whatever law that govern them, you may not be able to just remove him. But it is a minister, and that's why we talk about leadership. There would always be somebody that is expected to guide the affairs of a given body. If he fails to do that, he will be sacked. Now, if you look at the legislative branch of government, all of them are elected and not appointed. If you look at the judicial branch of government, all of them are appointed and not elected. It is only the executive branch of government that has an elected official who also appoints the people. And the reason is because the president cannot be in Abuja and in Maiduguri, or cannot be in Abuja and Lagos, he cannot be in Abuja and somewhere in another part of the country. But he has people he assigned with the responsibility to carry out their duty. And so, yes, the president, Atiku Abubakar, when he becomes the president, as surely as he will take decisions where necessary. And you remember when PDP came on board in 1999 to 2007, that was evident in their way and modus operandi. There were sacking, there were reshufflement, there were acts by government that suggest that somebody is watching and somebody is taking decision when the need arises. A decision taken at the wrong time is worse than a right decision taken at the wrong time.
Well, which raises another question, Mr. Bwala, because you have just mentioned something now, which is there are 3 levels of employment in the civil service, be it federal, state, or local: the elected, the appointed, and the recruited, the people who apply to get jobs. Now, it's terminal for anyone who is elected into office, and perhaps for those who are appointed as well. But it's a little different, a lot different actually, for those who are recruited, who applied to get jobs. They are there much longer than anyone else who is appointed or elected. And consequently, one wonders exactly who is government, because they understand the system a lot more, and they can frustrate anyone who is unable to do whatever it is that he's supposed to do part-time. So that also speaks to perhaps a need to look at the way the civil service runs at the federal level in particular, where many say corruption actually resides. So what will be the focal point, or how will that be addressed, given that the civil service is the engine of the car and the appointed fellows are just maybe the body, the headlamps and all of that of the same vehicle?
Yeah, so you probably to say civil service reform, but I need you to know that there are civil service rules. There are codes also that govern operations by public servants. For example, a civil servant cannot run for political posts in the country. If you're a civil servant and you participate in political activities, then you can be sacked. A civil servant must come to work as required. A civil servant must not collect bribe or give bribe. A civil servant must not engage in fight. Or, there are rules that govern civil service. And so the ministers will hold the people to account. The pastor will hold the people to account. The director, so there is a chain of command. And I agree with you that the civil servants can frustrate a public officer, a public appointed officer like a minister. And so what that means is that then we have to look at civil service reform where necessary and ensure that we revamp the reform to ensure that the service of civil servant will be such that it will not give room for corruption or any other vices.
I'm interested in your candidate's position.
All right, so one more thing before you go. We understand when he says that it's not up to him to sort out the Wiki challenge. Many thought, wait a minute, does it mean that he has done all that he can? Has he offered all that he can to ensure that Wiki and the group come back to the PDP?
Yes, exactly so. He has offered all that he can. He has done all that he can. Like you told you, he met him in Port Harcourt. So that means he traveled there twice. He met him in Abuja. That means he moved from wherever location is to where Wiki is. And then the third one, he met him in London. And by the way, he was in France. When there was need for them to meet, he flew to London to meet with him.
So that means whatever demand that the group of 5 have, he's not going to accede to anything further.
No, we don't know what else is the demand other than we're pleading with them to come on board. You can see we're already moving. We're built to win, brother. We are going to win this election. Do you know what?
Without the G5?
No, we don't use the word with or without because we need people, right? But we are going to win.
You're moving on from the G5?
We've already moved, actually.
Oh.
We've already moved, but not without them.
We moved on. It means without them. Then.
I know you could move with someone in the same location or you move with someone at a different location.
Okay. There you go. Being political, that politicians do, isn't it? There you go. Daniel Bwala, spokesperson, Atiku Okowa, Presidential Campaign Organization. Thank you for coming on and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're back in a moment. Stay with us.